thank you so much for joining us here locally at Optus Bank for this discussion of Soul Care Sessions. And also thank you to everyone in the audience for being here. Give yourselves a round of applause. We got a live audience, y'all. We got a live audience. So once again, this is the second of the first Soul Care Sessions that we've had. The first one was back in February, and this one is now in the month of April. And April is significant because May coming up is Mental Health Awareness Month. But let's be honest, mental health awareness is something that we need to discuss every single month, not just in the month of May. So as we talk more about what Soul Care Sessions is about, this was created as a way for us as a community to come together and discuss things that we may be dealing with that we may not have had open discussions about as we were coming up. So by show of hands in the audience, can you raise your hand and tell us if you or your parents fostered mental health awareness in your own home? Did you have discussions about mental health awareness in your home? One person sort of kind of. I mean, so let's think about this. I mean, this is a small audience, but at the end of the day, I mean, if we had more people here, I think that there would be a mass of people who would not be raising their hands, especially in the minority community, who would say that they discuss mental health and openness. True. And there's a lot of stigma that's surrounding that. And so this event was created with the opportunity to have that discussion. So some of the things that we weren't able to discuss growing up, some of the feelings and emotions that we had, we weren't able to talk openly about. We can have that discussion now, and we can put some names and we can put some technical terms to some of the things that we dealt with as we were growing up, and try to find common ground in those things that we have endured, whether it be mental health issues or whether it be mental traumas. So again, I want to introduce our panel. Christian, always happy to have you. Christian Jackson is a licensed professional counselor, and she is also the author of Daddy Issues. And that is one of the reasons why I have her on this panel, because she talks openly in her book, but also with young students at the school where you teach at. And then also you talk openly with others, even in your church community, about some of the traumas that you endured at a young age. So happy to have you. Also happy to have for the first time Lamont Christian. He is a military veteran, served nearly more than 30 years actually as a command sergeant major, and has done wondrous things in our community now that he's retired. He is now at the Big Red Barn as the director of the Warrior Path program, which offers holistic care. And if you've been to Big Red Barn, if you heard about it, there's a lot of different unique things that you guys do there in order to take care of veterans, first responders, and service members who come there for PTSD treatment. So glad to have you here to kind of give us some insight on some of the things that you do, and then also talk openly about some of the things that you've endured as well too within your own family. And also happen to have Ms. Z Brown with us. She is the executive director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness here in the Midlands for Mid-Carolina. And so she has been working with other nonprofits, talking a lot in the community openly about mental health awareness as well. So we're glad to have her here with us as well. So let's dive right in. And Christian, I always love to have discussions about some of the things that you wrote in your book. I think it's important to talk about some of the generational traumas that you talked about that you endured. So give us a little bit of insight about how and why you decided to write Daddy Issues, and why it was so important for you to share that with young women, especially today.
Hey everybody. I am very adamant with my brand, my mission, my vision, Couch with Christian, to make sure that I am offering and holding space and giving services that I wish I had when I was going through, honey, okay? So when the anxiety was at its most high, the depression was super low, and I didn't really have a name. I didn't know what to call things, especially when I was in college, because we don't have the discussions. And frankly, because my parents didn't know, and they were dealing with their own traumas, didn't know what to call it. So, those are things that we think about generationally, about what we did get and what we didn't. So I don't believe that my parents intentionally kept things from me, right? So I want to kind of lay that foundation out there. And while that's true, I went through some things with my dad. My dad and I are having some struggles now in our relationship where we're not speaking. I was then a therapist, not talking to my daddy, and then having all my clients tell me, oh, I have all these relationship issues, and my daddy too. And I obviously couldn't say, me too, sis. Like, let's talk about our dads, because my job is to hold space for my clients and not to impede upon their sessions. And so because I was triggered, I went to therapy. And then my therapist said that thing that we all say to our clients: write a letter to, and you insert, you insert the person's name. And so as I started to write a letter to my dad and really kind of conceptualize the things I know I wish I would have had, then my book was born. And so the book is sharing my story and then anecdotes of clients that I've served over the years, obviously changing their name and things for confidentiality, but really kind of painting the picture of what daddy issues is. So we have a book that we diagnose clients with. It's called the DSM-5 TR. Right now, there's a text revision. It's where you get your schizophrenia and your alcohol use disorder and all those things. And there is not a daddy issues diagnosis, y'all. So I made one up. And it is based upon separation anxiety, reactive attachment disorder. And I do trainings around and post-traumatic stress disorder because I treat daddy issues like emotional trauma. And sometimes there are physical traumas and there are mental traumas that are all encompassed around your dad being there and then your dad not being there, all the way in between, right? So how many of us know your people that you call, your support system can be there, but then they ain't really there, right? So emotionally, it may be distant. So I'm painting the picture and offering this foundational definition of what daddy issues is, according to CJ, so that we have language. So what I'm passing down in the last 3 years is this: let's give a name to what daddy issue symptoms are, so that when you go to your friends or you go to your therapist, you can say, oh, I can link this back to the absence or presence or overbearing presence of my father. These are the clinical terms in case you need to break it down to your therapist, right? So I use all that and give practical tools and tips through my GRACE method, which is a system I use to help people to address their daddy issues. I've been asked a lot about mommy issues, so I finally wrote that out last month. And so I train my colleagues around what daddy issues are according to me. I just did a training about mommy and daddy issues. So it's called Resolving the Parent Trap, so that we can help our clients to have that support that, again, I wish I would have had kind of going through. So the daddy issues movement is led by me. Nobody talks about daddy issues like CJ at all, period. Don't let nobody tell you anything different. And I'm proud of that because I have to be, as the face of the daddy issues movement, I have to have this enthusiasm to break the stigma, which is part of what our conversations are about. We have to break the stigma and the shame of what women with daddy issues, especially Black women with daddy issues, have. So the more we talk about these things, I think the stronger we become, the more educated we are, the more likely we are to reach out for help and actually increase the confidence and decrease the anxiety and depression symptoms. So it's all clinical talk, how I've treated and all the things, but I'm listening to what my clients are saying about recovering from relationship trauma, like bad breakups and things like that. And so then I'll take that door in and say, hey, tell me about your dad or your mom or whatever. So I will tell you how to find me later, but that is what I am heading up at my brand, Couch with Christian, as the daddy issues therapist. Now I'm on a college campus. I'm a director of counseling at South Carolina State. So that just happened last week. And so now I get to go there and gather data, about what the students are saying, what the new generations are saying. So it's cool, generational trauma.
Yep.
Now I'm talking to the babies.
Well, I'm gonna come back to you because there's a surprise that you actually, something you endured recently where you reached out to some of the executive producers of the Hulu show Unprisoned, dealing with daddy issues. So that was, when I saw you posted that on social media, I was like, okay, we're making big strides now. So that's gonna
we'll see
what happens. But I mean, that was excellent for you to be able to do that, to be able to not only reinforce your brand, but also, now, mainstream television is actually putting out information to help others deal with some of those issues that they may have, stemming from parents. And, just to be upfront, this is not, a session that's geared towards bashing our parents. That's not what we're here for. We're actually, there's a saying that says, and Lamont, I think you can kind of, attest to this for sure. Let me scoop a little bit so I can see everybody. There's a saying that you have to forgive your parents for the things that they did not know. I think that's a big saying that's out there now. Can you talk about some of the things that, one of the reasons why you decided to join the military, how your childhood, was relative to your decision to join the military, and then also some of the things that you endured, traumas that you've actually endured recently that have shaped one of the reasons why you are at the Big Red Barn helping others?
Yeah, when you talk about looking at your past, really you're taking advantage of the experience and the lessons that you have in order to live going forward. Right. So you have to understand your past in order to live going forward. And when I look back at my childhood, I can identify moments in time where I didn't receive something. And of course, that shaped and molded me to say, I won't be that way. Something as simple as perhaps my father watching television for the longest I didn't like the evening news or Star Trek, right? But that's what he was watching when I'm trying to explain to him about the things that I'm doing as a young man. And he was like, and just remote control and doing his thing. And what I'll tell you is, I learned from that to say, I won't be that type of father. So when my children or somebody's talking to me, I turn the TV off. And so I took something good out of what was a bad experience. But what I'll also tell you is it took me to what you just said, Brandon, to go through the training that I do out of the Big Red Barn Retreat and my own self-awareness was to understand that my father was decompressing. Like he was trying to find a moment of peace in his long day. I didn't understand that as a young man, and he didn't know how to articulate that. And so it took me to look back and understand my past in order to live forward, to really understand what my father was going through. And to your point that you had just made about referencing growing up as parents and not having a book or the ability to just open it up and go to page 12 and have the answer to how to raise a child. I was talking to one of my daughters one day, and she has a daughter, so she's raising my granddaughter. And of course, I'm doing what all grandparents do. And now I have all the answers, so I'm going to tell my daughter how to raise my granddaughter. And I'm giving her the wherewithal, and she stops me and says, one, she's grown. So I respect that. She's an adult. And her comment to me basically was, that ain't how you raised me. You didn't do the very things you're telling me I should do to my daughter. The conversation was beginning to get heated, right? Not to the point of disrespect, but definitely she was going to make her point. And it was at that moment that I realized, and I spoke these words to her, what I said was, you're right. You were watching me grow up the same time you were growing up.
Period.
That completely changed our relationship from that point forward, because I watch her now with my granddaughter in a place of love and nurturing that it was not where she was basically replicating her experience in life and doing those things that we all do. As we talk about generationally, we just pass on what we know because we don't know any better. And although we try to do better, we revert to what we know in times of crisis, which is the easiest way. And that was what I was experiencing. And so I can see now the growth in my daughter through my own growth. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yep. I think how many can say that they have parents that can articulate, in the same way that Lamont has kind of articulated?
Right.
I would say that my dad articulates better with my daughter than he does with me.
Right.
Wow.
That's so
Right.
interesting.
Isn't it interesting though? Yeah.
It's exactly that thing, right? Because I made my mistakes with my children. And then I look back and say, I wish I should have, would have, could have. And so now I have an opportunity to do it right with my granddaughter. The unfortunate part is, as the adult, the mother of the granddaughter, there's resentment there, right? Because I didn't get that affection. I didn't get the loves and the hugs, right? Because you was at work or you was off doing your thing. And as a parent, doesn't matter if it's a father or mother, in most cases, in the communities that are socioeconomically strapped, and I won't say broken or dysfunctional, but just struggling, right? It's a requirement that both parents work, or if not working, doing something to bring something into the household. And so it creates exactly what you said, and we see it. But unfortunately, as parents, until we are able to take care of ourselves internally and become more self-aware and be in that place of being okay with being uncomfortable with saying something out loud. And it's not necessarily apologizing, but letting go of that shame, letting go of that guilt. It's going to be difficult to be able to say to you, I failed you, right? Because that's what I'm going to have to say. I let you down and I'm sorry. That's hard.
That is hard.
So I'd rather show you that I'm sorry by doing things for somebody that I think you love, your daughter, your child, as opposed to saying it to you. It's hard.
Can I add a point? Because this is interesting, right? So like my wheels are turning about why that is. Just speaking of why is it that grandpa can be, more affectionate towards granddaughter, like skipping that generation, right? So I'm workshopping it now. Y'all let me know if this makes sense, because I'm thinking that I have a chapter in my book about daddy issues and motherhood. So how it affected me as a parent. And I'm thinking about the fact that my kids, my husband and I have two beautiful kids, 12 and 6, and they're boys, and they trigger the crap out of me. They're just like you're reliving childhood as you are, like you're reliving, like I'm watching Ninja Turtles the other day. Like, but that it's also kind of because I want to do the things that my dad or my mom didn't do, then I'm like kind of extra with some things, and I had to realize that. But what I'm thinking about is I wonder if because the grandchild is a generation away and you don't live with them, right? They can't trigger you as much. It's not your responsibility.
You care about them, you want them to do well. I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah.
That's
But at the
it.
end of the day, your child is not responsible for creating that successful or
Mhm.
productive adult. You want to contribute to it. But
Right.
that's not your primary responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, his dad was trying to make sure he had everything.
Mm-hmm.
He decompressed it.
Mm-hmm.
But, he had to make sure that the lights was on and this and that and the other.
Yeah.
In your household, your parents want that for your house, they want your lights to be on, but that's not what they're built.
Mm-hmm.
That's your responsibility.
Yes.
So they're stepping away from it. So
Yeah.
they can give all that love and stuff. It's like, I'm not gonna go to you right now because they go fuss.
Mm-hmm.
But the grandkids get a hold of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the gap kind of gives you that perspective, I think, too.
And
That's interesting.
I was gonna say,
It's getting so good.
proximity, right? Like whether you live at home, because I will tell you, my children live with me. I didn't reduce my home and get a smaller home. So when the decision was to move back in, I was like, it's okay, right? Because truthfully, I'm being selfish. I've told them that. I want to create these memories that I didn't create before, so I'm being selfish. But what I do recognize is the license to return to sender is what you have. Even in my own home, I can say, hey, go back to your mother, right? Like, you want something, go ask your mother. Or like you said, if they're visiting, and I don't live with my kids or my grandchildren, it's the same thing. Hey, come get your child, right? That license to return to sender is there. And like it gives me that space that I didn't have when it's my child. Like I can't return to sender. Like, right here in front of me. Only thing I can do is run away or decompress,
Right.
watch TV.
See, coming to you, let's dive a little bit deeper into that whole issue of talking about how things may skip a generation. I think we are making strides within our generations as we, talk about mental health awareness, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done because there's still that stigma that still exists when it comes to families and how they address it. Because back in the day, it used to be, okay, well, as the saying goes, my grandmother used to say, what happens in my house stays in my house. We don't talk about, things that happen outside of the family or outside of the house. But, there's now this movement that, okay, well, if something is happening in the house that hurt me or caused issue, then it should be talked about. So why is that so important in this day and age? And how are we making those strides now when it comes to mental health awareness to actually foster those conversations?
I want to say, we tend to coddle our kids a little bit and don't want to say certain things around them, but kids are very open about mental health these days. Far more open than I was and far more open than, my parents were. And, I don't necessarily have a clinical background. And so when I took this job with NAMI 7 years ago, one of the first things I did was I started reading ESM about the different diagnoses. And unfortunately, one of the side effects was that I diagnosed my whole family. Let me tell you, I went through a relative and was like, okay, there you go. Yep. But I want to say that, my family, we didn't talk about mental illness at all. But probably every woman in my house, in my family was on a nerve pill.
I was just thinking nerves. That's what they call anxiety is nerves.
Let me get my nerve pill. It was there, but we didn't have a name for it. We didn't address it. There was sometime, we didn't talk about it. And so in even talking about the generational trauma in my family, I was very sheltered. I'm an only child, spoiled and appreciated. And I'm okay with that. But they protected me. I grew up in Phoenix City, Alabama, Columbus, Georgia, but I wasn't exposed to a lot of the things that, happened to my parents. And so even though they, I don't necessarily have the generational trauma, I also don't have the generational resilience. And so I had to sit down and learn things for myself. And I had to, like I said, learn about the diagnoses, learn about coping skills. I actually diagnosed myself with anxiety. all my life, my parents and my family's been telling me to pray on it, let it go,
Yes.
give it to God,
Mhm.
all of that, and I couldn't do it.
Right,
And it made
Yes.
me feel like a bad Christian.
right.
But once I actually figured out this is what's going on and went to the doctor, it was a blessing for me because I gave a name.
Yeah.
And I turned around and I started noticing things in my children. Then I started to let them know, if there's anything you need to tell me, want to talk about, please let me know. I will leave pamphlets. They come to our events. And so my youngest son, he actually decided he wanted to speak to a counselor. Fine, we found one for him and we go. And so I think a lot of kids these days, they are very open and understanding, hey, I'm depressed or I'm anxious or, and they know what they're going through. But the thing is, we have to be receptive.
Yes.
We can't say, oh, what do you have to be depressed about?
Right.
Because when you do that, you kind of tie it to gratitude.
Mhm.
You got a good job, we pay, you don't have to work, we pay your bills. What do you have to be depressed about? Possibly nothing.
Mhm.
But there's no reason why that, there's no explanation, but they still feel it. And we still have to be open to
Right.
accepting it and having that conversation with them and saying, okay, if you feel depressed, let's talk about it. What's going on? Do we need to seek help? Do we need to go to the doctor?
Yep.
So
There's before I lose this thought, and I'm gonna come to you, Lamont, for that. I think that there's something of what we call the term diminishing experiences. When when sometimes our parents, like you said, make those comments, oh, what do you have to be depressed about? What's wrong with you? You're strong, you can deal with this. I mean, you're diminishing that experience, and ultimately you're teaching your children that, okay, I shouldn't express my
This is
feelings.
not
What's
a
happening
safe
within,
space.
right,
This is not a
exactly.
safe space.
So you don't have that safe space. So I think you're kind of going in the same direction.
you're actually exactly that, right? Is we have to determine how to create what we call judgment-free zones, right? Because we grow up in households where the slightest thing receives a critical response to that. I caught myself, my child would clean the kitchen and say, yo, you did a good job cleaning the kitchen, but you didn't sweep the floor. You didn't take out the trash. So the butt just negated any, acknowledgement that I made. And so again, through my own self-awareness, I had to be in a place, or like I like to say, a space to where I can have a conversation and talk to somebody about this is a judgment-free zone. Like whatever is happening is not going to come back around and hit you.
Yeah.
And words mean something. And so what I've run into is the piece that you both talked about with the DSM. And the world that I operate in post-traumatic growth is this. We understand what post-traumatic stress is. I could probably ask everyone in here, how many of you know about post-traumatic stress? And how many would raise your hands? Exactly, everybody.
I lose my job if I did.
So my next question would be, how many of you know about post-traumatic growth?
No, that's new now.
And I only see this, and it could be 100 people in the room, or it could be 5 people. Only 1 to 2 hands would go up, and that's a sad state of affairs, because if we know that there's this end of the spectrum, which is post-traumatic stress, my 8-year-old granddaughter knows what PTS is. It must be something at the other end of the spectrum. What is that? Well, that's growth. That's taking the challenges, and words do mean something, Christian. And what I would say is, I look at traumas as being challenges. Why? Because if you was to lose your cell phone, that would probably be something pretty traumatic, depending on what generation you are, right? But as an adult, if I lose it, I'm like, that's why I got insurance. I'm gonna go get another one. I'll transfer my pictures, whatever. Like whatever. I look at it differently. But the comparison of the challenge is where we get in trouble because of that. When somebody says, well, why are you upset about losing your phone? It's just a phone. You don't see me, you don't value me because this is important to me. And that's the struggle, is being able to have, I think, these type of conversations to get to the meat of it and then say, I've been told what's wrong with me. Like this book, this DSM, it's a book full of opinions
Exactly.
that have come together by experts.
Written by white men for white men.
Right?
Yeah.
What number we on in there
Right.
again?
Five.
Okay.
And so this book, when you display certain things on any given day, when I open it up, I'm gonna go right down this checklist. And I get told what's wrong with me, but I don't get told how to live going forward. And so that's what post-traumatic growth is about, right? Taking the challenges that I've experienced and using them as a way to turn my struggles into strength. So when I take my pain and I can turn that into purpose, is because my desire is to move forward, not move on, because moving on means I'm still dragging my crap with me, right?
Mhm,
Or just
mhm.
all these comments we get told as young people in our culture, in our community is, hey, we don't talk about that stuff.
Right.
It stays in the house. We don't go to them people. You know, that's all these types of conversations get passed down, and as tradition, right? And so we have an opportunity now to really do what we must do, which is understand our lives backwards, understand it backwards, but live it going forwards.
Mhm.
I always use the analogy of a car, right? When we look at our rear view mirror, that thing is only like 67 inches, right? But that windshield is like 67 feet.
Mhm.
So that's what I have to use perspective of life. But yet, meanwhile, many of us will hang out in that rearview mirror trying to live, driving forward. That's why we run into like relationships and we run into confusion and chaos in the way we deal with people. Yeah, I see you over there laughing, right? But you're spending time up in that rearview mirror. And so I want to do something real quick, man. I'm gonna shut up because I'm being rude at this point. But do something for me, right? Physically, everybody, put their feet on the ground.
I'm gonna take my shoes off and ground myself
Yes.
so I can feel the cold.
Right. And,
I got
and
you.
exactly what Christian just said is what I'm asking for. The tile under her feet is what she feels, right? If she wiggles her toes, if you feel it, you feel this is where we are right now. If I was to ask you where you were a week ago, can you feel it under your feet wherever
No.
you were? If I ask you where you're gonna be a week from now, can you feel it under your feet right now? Right? The past and the future. That's where we spend most of our real estate in our minds.
Literally.
That's where the depression comes from.
The
Because I'm
past.
worried about the past on an issue I cannot resolve.
Anxiety's in
I'm
the future.
anxiety when I'm full of that because I'm worried about what's gonna happen tomorrow. It ain't even here yet. And the beauty is, we your toes. You feel that under your shoes? That's where we at.
Mhm.
That's where we are. And that's what post-traumatic growth is about, is being in where you are, being grounded, being in the present, and understanding that everything that has happened in my beautiful life in the past is exactly what's going to make my life in front of me more beautiful. And the challenge is getting that message to us to realize this ain't the world I got to live in.
Right.
And this is life.
Yep.
PTS is life. You know, being scared, being angry. What created those emotions is what's different from all of us. There's too many times I'm in my community, or I call it the warrior community, right? With soldiers, sailors, and police. And I have to keep this mask on. I gotta be tough. Then you add to that, I'm a black man. I better be tough. And so this piles up on me as a person. Did you hear what I just said? As a person. And so when you start laying these layers of emotions on it, it doesn't say a black angry man. It just says I'm an angry man. It doesn't say I'm a man. It's like I'm an angry person. So if I was to ask you if you've ever felt angry, you'd be like, well, yeah. Now what created it might be different for us, but you've been there. Have you ever been sad? Of course. But what created that sadness will obviously be different. But that feeling, that's a shared emotion that we have all felt. That's the fight that with people. And when we can get past the differences and recognize the similarities, we begin very quickly to start moving in this direction of growth. So I'm gonna be quiet because I love this.
That was
Session 3.
I'm here.
So there was a scene that I thought was very poignant to this discussion that we're having right now in one of my favorite TV shows, Being Mary Jane. And there was a point in that show where she was trying to stop herself from being emotional and crying. So she pinched herself and she was like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And so that was like telling, with being a black woman, that, okay, you know, in order for you to be strong, you can't show certain emotions, or you can't be, you know, emotional. What for that particular case, in that particular scene, she was not trying to be emotional in that moment because she knew that she had to be on television in less than 30 minutes or so. But in reality, you know, some of us try to stop ourselves from feeling emotions, period. But Christian, talk about the importance of why you have to feel in order to understand what emotions you are having.
Okay. Let me think of an analogy, because the word numb is coming to mind. And I'm gonna tell y'all a story. Remember last time I was here?
Yep.
I was wearing pumps and I wasn't supposed to because I broke my toe. Okay. It was a whole thing. So I broke my toe, right? And I wore pumps because I'm going to see Brandon. Like, I'm going to be on a panel. I want to be cute, right? It was numb and it was a little tingly, and then I just lost all feeling. And then eventually the feeling came back when I got home. I was walking around the house, whatever, and I was done. And then I realized I was in pain, right? Because the numbness eventually went away. If I had done the thing to treat myself in the moment and bring the feeling back, then I could have properly treated myself, right? So I think about trauma kind of in the same way. A lot of us have experienced so many compiled negative, significant traumatic experiences to where our body is just going to shut down emotionally, physically, spiritually, all the things, and you're numb. I get a lot of that when my clients come to me for the first time, and they're just like, I just can't feel, sis, like whatever. And my question is, how is you going to move forward and grow, right? How you going to grow forward past the PTS if you don't feel it?
Mm-hmm.
If I felt my toe and I knew it was hurting then, I might have taped her up, right?
Yep.
I might have actually treated it. It's the same way with emotions. If I'm going to numb myself to get through a moment, which I think is a healthy coping skill up to a point, right? There's a difference between ignoring and kind of distracting yourself, right? So if you are going to ignore it and you're like, oh, I just don't want to feel the things, then you may forget and do what you always have done and be tunnel vision. That's the survival mode because we're doing our response, our trauma responses, right? If you do not feel the emotion, then you will likely not go back to that thing that made you feel like crap. Because it feels better for you to not feel the thing. But it's not going to help us in the long run. So a lot of what I do in the beginning, because I'm getting a lot of first timers to therapy, is I'm going to pull up feelingswheel.com. Everybody put it in your brain. You need to have an emotional vocabulary that is more extensive than I'm just pissed off or I'm sad, right? Because those are what we call secondary emotions. So I can know that I'm mad, but then I don't really know sitting with it. It's just the tip of the iceberg. So first I felt invalidated. First I felt disrespected. I felt infuriated first. And then I ignored it. I was numbing myself because I had to go to work. I got to take care of the kids. I have all these things to do. And eventually it's going to blow up, right? If you don't know the correct name of the emotion that you are feeling, then you're not going to be able to match that self-care. So I'm going to need something different if I'm just a little upset, right? I can watch Netflix or, binge a show and be okay. But if I'm feeling infuriated or disrespected or invalidated or violated, then I'm going to need a different level of self-care. Netflix ain't going to cut it. So you have to know, and this is what I tell my clients, I don't say should a lot to them, but I say you should know exactly what you're feeling so that you can properly match the coping skill that you're going to need to address whatever it is to bring down the anxiety, to address the depression. And that's empowering. It's scary, yeah. But if you're in the moment, right? Like Lamont is saying, if you're in the moment and you know you're in a session with Christian, you know you're at a training with Z, or you're out here on the barn with Lamont, and right now I'm in this moment, then I'm good now, right? Like I'm not where I'm going to be, where I was. I'm safe now with my feet in the grass. I'm not even there with all the million different scenarios we make up. I ain't even there yet. And it's going to be a slim chance that any of this stuff even happens. So let's be here. How can you mindfully ground yourself? And part of that is starting to appreciate where you are now and feeling what you feel now. That's the power. And that's what I think a lot of people ignore when it comes to having these conversations, because you're already counting yourself out and you believe, I ain't going to be able to handle that, when you don't give yourself credit for the trauma you've already survived. So I'm just like, that don't go together, sis. That don't make no sense. You've already done it. So, you're stronger than what you believe. And one of the things my own therapist and therapist friends remind me is that I have everything I need, I already have. And I want you guys to walk away with that tonight. If you don't know anything, all the tools, all the things you need to ground yourself, you were born with. But we forget that because of all the distraction and the lies that we believe after experiencing a traumatic event. We're only born with two fears. Y'all know what they are? Falling and loud noises. Which means everything else is learned.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is learned.
So it's numbness.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay? You forget that all you were scared of was falling. But even then, you get back up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything else is learned, which just that helps me poke holes in so many things Because boy, I ain't even got to be here, right? What am I scared of this for? I'm smarter than what I remember, right? Like who told me and how did I forget how smart and strong and powerful I was? And I think that even that pinching Mary Jane did on the show was her silencing herself.
Mhm.
She should have felt that.
Yep.
She should have felt that.
Yep.
That wasn't fair.
I'll tell you that what you point to that I focus on in post-traumatic growth is really creating the capacity to deal with life before it comes. Right? Because the blows of life are still going to come. You're still going to get fired. You're still not going to get the promotion you want. You're still going to break up a relationship. You still like life is still going to try to knock you out. But what happens is if, just like you said, if I keep going through the process of getting up because I get knocked out, I get knocked out again, I get knocked out again, the body keeps counting.
Oh,
Right.
yes.
And so the earth is like an earthquake. Each time something happens, whether it's a micro earthquake or one major one, right? That stuff is still taking its toll on me. But if I could present you with something to say, do these things before life starts knocking you out. And now you're in the ring of life like Mike Tyson, right? You bobbing and weaving. That blow is still coming, but it doesn't knock you out. You
Right.
still get punched in the stomach, but because of these practices, these things you've been doing over and over, when you get punched in the stomach by life, you don't get dropped to your knees. Because I would tell you, I don't want to keep getting knocked out and you come over and wave your finger in front of me and say how many fingers I got up, tell me to take short breaths. I want to get hit and be like, that's all you got? That's
Period.
it?
Period.
Because what doesn't kill me is going to make me stronger. And so the world of, again, post-traumatic stress and sliding over to post-traumatic growth requires me to do things to build capacity in my life before. We take breaths, right? We say, hey, breathe and relax and breathing methods. But what if I was to do these breathing exercises before I even walk out my door?
Right.
What if I do all of these practices, right? These things that put us in a place of being grounded before I go out, right? So now I have what I call capacity. So when you come at me sideways, I'm not all the way up here already, right? Because when I got ready to leave this morning, my keys weren't where they were supposed to be. So I'm already a little ticked
Already
off,
on 10.
right? Then I get out here and you want to cut me off in traffic. I'm right in my new car today. For real? Then I get to work and you say something to me crazy, like, seriously, this ain't the day.
Yep.
Right? And then I open up my emails and I got an email that I'm getting ready to say, as per my last email.
Per my last discussion.
Today.
So I'm already up here. But if I could create that space and do things that open it up and I feel good, I do my gratitude. I'm grateful for something before this day starts. I do my exercises. I put my feet in the grass and feel that wetness in between my toes. I'm like this. Now when my keys are missing, I'm like, okay.
Got a little wiggle room.
I got a spell.
You do.
Right? You cut me off. Oh, girl, you got to get somewhere quicker than
Maybe
me.
you had a bad day,
Right,
sis.
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
You just saved me from going through that intersection. I'm going to find some positive regard in the rest of my life going forward because I got space.
You created the wiggle room.
Right.
Yes.
Because
Right.
you need it.
Right.
Because
Right.
the day just started. You gonna wake up on 10?
Right.
Yes.
So
I love that.
and then again, but that's an effort because it's creating this thing I love, which is called choice. Right? We
Yep.
were in the back
Huge.
talking, and it's like you have a choice
Yes.
to go left or right, right? And I get to choose the attitude and the effort that I possess.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
You can come in here all day and take that from me, but no, you can't take my attitude,
Right.
and you definitely ain't taking my effort.
Right.
You can have everything else. You take my shoes, you take my clothes, you take my money. Take it. It's yours. But my attitude and my effort, can't have it.
And my
Yeah.
knowledge and my power.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's the key. A lot of people, especially young people, they don't understand that in life, everything is all about choices. And, some of my biggest life experiences taught me that, I don't have to experience certain things if I don't want to. I can make a positive choice. I can make a conscious decision to say that, okay, this is not the way that I want to live my life. The way that, my mom, dad, sister, aunt, cousin, brother, whoever in your family, just because they ascribe or assimilate to whatever was going on within the family in terms of those generational curses, not necessarily traumas, because there are issues that some of our families actually deal with as well too, that continue generationally. When we talk about poverty, when we talk about domestic violence, when we talk about sexual abuse. I mean, alcoholism. I mean, there's so many things that can happen, and those are all potentially learned behaviors. But the thing is that you can make a conscious choice not to do that, and understanding that within your own mind is what's most important. To say that you can get away from all of that.
But in my presentations lately, I've been telling, we've talked about self-care and things like that. But, and we do have a choice. But I think a lot of us these days, and I don't know if it's because of the pandemic or whatever, but we're on autopilot. It's like we're in survival mode. We're not thriving. We're just existing. And it's just like, okay, this is what I've always done. This is what I was taught to do. So this is what I'm going to do. And it's, we forget that we have a choice. And I will say that the pandemic has really, it changed my measure of success. A lot of things that were just non-negotiable that my parents taught me that had to happen, I let a lot of those things go, like ironing. When I grew up, you were not leaving the house unless you were a priest or whatever. But, I realized that the world is not going to end by those small things that I've decided to take out of my life, these things that cause me anxiety. I had to get up in the morning, had to iron my son's stuff, just little things in my life. Even with my son, the AB honor roll, didn't let that go. With the year of homeschooling. But, we do have to, sometimes you have to take the time to think about what your choices are and purposefully, do that. Because we go to work, we come home, we clean up, we do homework, we go to bed. We go to work, if everything we do is just by habit. Yes. And we don't even think about the things that we can eliminate from our day that makes things easier for us. I don't have to fold clothes once they come out the bath, so I don't want to come out the dryer. Somewhat of a hard lesson.
Yeah.
But, it's something that made my life easier.
Yeah.
Yep, it does.
And there are small things, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but there are small things that we don't even think about the fact that, hey, maybe I need to find another job. If I wake up miserable every single day.
Those are small
And
indicators.
the first thing that
I
I
ain't got
think
to be
about
here.
is how much leave, how much sick leave I got.
Do I want to go to work today?
You're like, wait a minute, oh, I got a meeting. You can find another job.
Yep.
My dad retired from the phone company at 39 years.
Wow.
I'm not gonna retire from any place.
Right.
I don't have 39
Who does that anymore? Yeah.
So I'm gonna piece it together and hopefully,
Make it work.
But the thing is, I think for me, I love my job, but we don't put enough weight on peace of mind.
Yeah. Ooh.
Peace of mind in itself is therapy, is medication, is important. And so when we don't give ourselves those choices, we're doing ourselves a disservice.
We are.
So,
Agreed.
you all have said a few words, like words mean something to me.
Oh, yeah.
When somebody was to ask you, how you doing today, right? We get words like, I'm surviving. That's down here.
Right, period.
And still holding on.
I'm
Yep,
coping.
just holding on.
That's a little bit better than surviving, but I'm coping. I'm living, followed by the dream, right? You'll hear that sometimes. And somewhere in the middle of there, you might hear I'm blessed, highly favored. And I'm saying that, but perhaps I'm still struggling, right? Here's what I'm looking for. When's the last time you heard somebody, as he said, thriving? Right? When do we hear that term when somebody says I'm thriving? And the value in that is what Christian and Z have said about being able to take the things that we have. I call them gifts, right? The things that we have, and use that as a way to propel us through our life to where we're thriving. And I want to be able to take the skills that I have of perhaps looking at life through a lens of being hypervigilant, right? Because I grew up as an only child with a shoestring around my neck with a key on the end of it. And that's how I went home every day and opened up the door alone because my single parent mother was out trying to raise, and take care of me. And so I'm watching everything and everybody, right? Which was what made me a good soldier because these skills and experiences was developed and honed as a child growing up in New York City.
That's a lot for
Right?
you.
And that's just scratching the surface, but this continues to build on who I become. And so what happens now is I'm using those same skills to live a beautiful life. So that awareness that I have is no longer me worrying about who's coming through a door. My awareness now is as I was sharing with Christian, how the blouse she's wearing, it's my favorite color. I can appreciate that, right? I can appreciate your smile when we started talking, right? Like, that's what I'm gonna take away, and your smile. You have a very beautiful smile.
No, I see you hiding, child.
And so these are the things now I can take that attention to detail, right? Because I'm walking down the city street worrying about who's gonna come over here and do something to me.
Right.
I now take that skill and live this life where I can appreciate being in the presence of the people that I care about, and I'm living a genuine and authentic life. That's the challenge, right? By creating that space. And what that really boils down to is the thing that I'm trying to do in my life. As you was talking about this, right? The thing that I'm trying to do, whatever that is aligned with the thing that I want to do. Because that's where this comes from. The things that I want come from here, and the things that I'm trying to do come from here. When those things are not aligned,
Yes.
we out of whack. And the people around us that care about us know it. They don't know how to articulate it. They don't know how to say it, but they can feel that you ain't. The audio is not matching the video. There's two different things happening. And I don't trust you now. We don't have a connection. And those are the two most important things: is that I trust you, and it is a connection. And when that comes to reality, when I'm being truthful with you, I'm scared. What black man is going to tell his wife or his daughter or his friend that I'm scared? The words ain't coming out my mouth,
They not.
but I'm being truthful because I want you to trust me. I'm trying to create a relationship. Now it's aligned. And it's like, you know what? I'm scared too. There's value in that. Then we begin to realize that I'm not alone. And that's what we're afraid of, is being alone.
Yeah.
You know, first
Right?
Ooh.
I ain't about to say this out loud. Right? I'm going to carry this with me, and I'm going to hide it every chance I get. And don't mess around and expose it, because then I'm going to be angry with you. Right? I'm going to lash out at you because you're calling me out. That's what we're struggling with. When we talk about our young people, we want to know why our youth
Going through what they're going
lives
through.
all the time.
Yes.
And that's one of the things, just to piggyback on your point, because you mentioned shame earlier. And what we're doing now is basically a group. I love doing groups, right? It's one of my favorite things to do. But we're talking out loud about these things. I see you engaged and nodding and agreeing and all those things, even if you're not verbalizing. But shame cannot live in community. And that's what Dr. Brene Brown says. So by you saying, I don't want to be alone, I'm saying it out loud. I want you to hear me, see me, feel me, whatever that looks like, vibes and energies of what the kids are saying now, right? As long as I know I'm not by myself, my shame is bloop. Because I used to run rape crisis groups and support groups in psychoeducation in that realm of sexual assault. And I was just on the phone with someone de-escalating all the way down here from Orangeburg for my job about how, oh my God, I can't believe this happened to me. And I didn't want to minimize or do the toxic positivity thing where, girl, you strong. You got through it. It's okay, because then that takes away from the experience, right? You diminish it. And I just want to add that if you feel like you're the only one, going to a trusted person that you know will receive what you have to say, even if you don't have a trusted person per your standards, because your standards may be skewed because you don't trust me because of your trauma. So that's another thing. But giving it a chance, saying the things out loud, because I guarantee you it's going to be someone that's like, ooh. Okay, and that's why I've been way more vocal about things and just trying to speak my truth about stuff.
It's important to have that discussion because it creates a sense of community. It's like, you're going through that too, so am I. So,
lived experience and that shared wisdom that you can get.
Shared wisdom,
It's invaluable.
Right.
What you all just described is growth.
I like it. I'm growing.
Yes.
Okay, then.
Yes.
That's growth, right?
I'm gonna keep growing.
Okay.
No, because
Yes, we got a question.
Talking about growth
Yes.
and you're growing, but your immediate circle of your family is not.
Oh.
You don't want to isolate, but at the same time, for your peace, happy, and that growth to continue, you gotta remove yourself.
Everybody can't go with you, sis.
Yeah.
Hey, with those beautiful roses at your grandmother's house.
Yep.
The reason they were beautiful is because every now and then she go out there and prune them.
Mm.
She didn't cut them off. Right? She didn't pull them out and uproot them. She would go prune them. And sometimes that's what we have to do in order to really bring that beauty out. Sometimes we may have to prune the very people that we are close to give them that space and grace for your growth. Because we were just in the back talking, Kenny and I used the term resonate. And we hear that sometimes. Oh, that resonates with me.
Yes.
Resonation is a vibration and this energy that you were just talking about, like heat. Heat resonates. That's when the ground moves beneath your feet when things resonate. And so that's what would happen is when you are taking care of yourself in a way and that growth is happening, the people around us ain't got no choice. They either gonna grow or they gonna get out the way. And so your growth will happen. And then after you grow, the next person will begin to grow, right? That's a concentric circle of life, the ripple effect. And so what I would say is, just like in an airplane, they tell you, you got to put whose mask on first.
Yours.
Yep, yours.
You got to.
Yep.
You're trying to help everybody and their mama, and you're going to be out. But you put yours on first, then you can help many more people. So
Yep.
your growth is important.
I have a comment too. Oh, go ahead.
So I was gonna say, when you're dealing with mental health issues or when you're trying to take care of yourself, sometimes you will call the crowd. Sometimes you will really find out who your true friends are and who your safe family members are. And you don't have to cut them away, like you said, come away.
Right.
But what grandma said, that long handle spoon.
Mhm.
You can't go tell everything to everybody.
Right.
And just because, again, and please, I would also say, give your family members grace.
Yes.
Not everybody understands
Literally gonna say that.
mental health
Mhm.
conditions. Just for NAMI, we have support groups of people living with mental health conditions, but we also have support groups
For the
of family
families.
members.
Yep.
Because family members need to understand how to communicate, with their loved ones. They need to understand, what they're going through and how not to diminish it.
Yep.
So, they might just not understand. I know my family would not, because we didn't have those conversations. But know who you can be safe with, and who you can share those intimate things with. But at the same time, be understanding and understand that as a community, we don't necessarily know everything and embrace everything. No.
Yes.
Not just, so did you have a specific question about it?
No,
You was making the
no,
comment?
just a comment on just
Mm-hmm.
as I've evolved.
Yeah.
I've had to isolate myself from people that literally have been there since day one.
Yeah.
And they don't understand it. And it hurts me that I have to do that, but to protect my peace.
Mm-hmm. And I just,
What you just said is you taking control of your life, because you can't control nobody else. Establishing boundaries is okay.
yeah.
That's you taking control of your space. So it's okay. That's good.
So say once you make those boundaries,
Yes.
when it is who is an exception? Like, when should I go back to my past and try to rekindle it and say, do you want to grow with me?
Ooh,
Why allow that space?
that.
That's a good one.
You don't have to. You don't
Yep.
have to do anything. It's a choice. If you feel like that person brings value to your life, and that maybe they didn't understand this one aspect, but you know how they say don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If there are some things that are redeemable about that relationship, by all means, pursue it, go back and share what you were going through. This is what I was going through. This is why this happened. But if they're one of the people that, you gotta try to hit that square peg in that round hole and force it to be a friendship,
So I would ask you
Okay.
this. Ask yourself this question. Why is that relationship important to you?
Why does
What do they
it
feed-
matter?
What do they feed and put attention?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And when you determine that this relationship is important to me, fill in the blank, you can share with them, I think, a way to express to them that I see you, I hear you, and I value you. And ultimately, what I do often, because I don't have the answers to the test, I will ask one last question. It's what do you need from me? And it puts it back on them to say, I just need you to blah, blah, blah. And that's when you go back to what you just said, and then I can create that boundary of like, I'm not willing to do that for my peace.
Yeah.
Or you could say, I can do that because that's how much I love you or care about you.
But with these boundaries.
With these boundaries,
Yeah.
right? And you then control your space, not them. But
Yeah.
just by letting them know, I do see you, I do hear you, I do value you. But ultimately, I always ask this question when I'm confused because I don't have the answer. I know it sounds like I got a few of them, but I don't. I have to ask the question, what do you need from me?
And that's a hard.
I'm sorry.
I want to say that.
I do have a really
in the
good
middle
point.
Of what both of y'all said.
Mhm.
So you, with your, growth part, and then the PTS part. It's like, okay, you said that as a man, sometimes you don't want to say you're scared, but then it's like at the same time, you got some people that's like always coming to you with like different problems, and then like you got people who feel like, oh, you'll figure it out, you got this, you good, you can make something happen. But it's like when you look around the circle, sometimes you'll probably ask yourself, okay, who is it gonna say you'll figure it out? Because you done failed so many times and you always manage to get back up.
That's resiliency.
Mhm.
That's resiliency.
Yeah, but even having that, how do you really take away that numbness though? Because now it's like, I'm sorry, I've gotten to the point
I'm taking
where-
it.
Running.
I'm gonna take it. So let's talk about our parts. Oh, go ahead.
I'm not finished.
Okay.
I've gotten to the point to now, it's like, I don't worry about a lot of stuff, because I always look at it like this. If it's something that I want to do, I'd rather go ahead and do it now, because, and I hate to say it like this, but I want to
It won't get
have,
done right.
I'd rather go ahead and do it now than to be on my dying bed saying, I wish I woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Oh, yes.
So it's like, if I want to do it, I'm gonna just go ahead and do it. Yeah, I think about it, but then at the same time, it's like, this may not be the best move, but if that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it, because now you're about to make yourself temporarily feel good. So like this weekend, for the last 2 weeks, I had some bad weeks. So
I'm sorry.
I wanted to go out, because for me, my mind is like always going, always going, always going. So I actually went out to a club by myself. And for me, that was the only way I could actually make my mind stop thinking about everything else I had going on. So when you say, don't numb yourself, like how Mary Jane was pinching herself, how do you get to that point? How do you get to the point to where you're no longer in the middle of growth and looking behind you at the same time?
So I'm gonna just drop this real quick. So growth requires a journey, right? It's a journey with an outcome or a destination, if you will. First of all, is education. We don't know what we don't know, right? Like you said, you picked up the DSM and went through it, and you're continuing to grow, right? And you're doing the same things. First, I gotta learn something. So do the research and like you said, learn about myself, learn about my past. And then what you want to look at is what I call regulation. Create balance in your life. I'm not saying you should do this, but I'm saying this is a way to create growth. It's been proven. This evidence-based, this historic-based. We've been doing this for thousands of years, if you think about it. Because education comes from my parents. Education comes from my friends, my neighbors, my clergy. The regulation is what I described earlier. Breathing exercises, doing exercise. Going to the club, believe it or not, that might be a regulatory practice.
Your body
It's
needed
something I
that, yeah.
read, right? I'm doing something for me to make me feel okay, right? But then you get to this part that's most difficult for us, which is what I call disclosure, where I got to be able to say out loud, like you said, I'm scared or something, right? It's a process. Listen, how I'm going, and this is happening on a regular basis. And then there comes a point where I'm changing my story. I'm creating this different person that people will see me and know who I am. And then last but not least, I got to try to find a way to give back. This cycle that I just described, these 5 domains of process in life, is a way to get to where you just said, where I'm okay with these choices that I'm making. My value system or whatever it is mine. And so you don't have that, I guess you would say, you create a place where you don't have to worry about things and judge yourself. Because that's what it is. We wind up judging ourselves. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up.
You had something?
Yes, we all got something to say now, but
Go ahead.
you go ahead.
Okay, great. I don't know, but can you repeat the question?
How do you get to the point to where you haven't like numbed yourself from it?
Okay, so pieces, right? I want to talk about parts of ourselves, and I think that might be relevant to everybody that's had questions in the last 10 minutes. Have y'all felt like and said something like, a part of me want to do this, and then another part of me want to do it, and another part of me want, right? Okay, so we have this thing where our inner child, I do a lot of inner child work, different ages. If you did a timeline of your life, your 5-year-old self needs something, your 10, your 15, your 16-year-old self. My childhood, my inner child is Ray Ray. That's what I've named her, okay? Ray Ray likes to pop off. And I have to get her under control. And her needs conflict with, college Christian, and now mom and wife Christian and the professional. Like all our needs conflict. And that is a lot for your body to handle, because you have all these inside parts that are like, no, me, I need this, and they're different, right? So the part of us, most likely a younger self, is carrying the most of our trauma. She has been with you the longest time. And so because she's carried so much for so long, we have to get to a point where we are regulating all these different needs. So what I do in therapy is trying to help us reconcile all these different parts. I wonder if y'all three was on my couch, right? Just because y'all three asked the questions, I would ask you, what part of yourself feels like you need to go back and pick somebody up that you didn't cut off or set a boundary with, right? I would ask you, is this 5-year-old self who maybe said, you know what, I will get in trouble if I'm not friends anymore. I want everybody to like me. I would want to flesh that out. I would wonder what parts for you are all like, oh, I'm just tired. Because it feels like, and I'm feeling the weight, like you're tired, right? So I'm wondering what part of yourself is seen and had the most trauma and is the most neglected. And you figure out what that part of you needs. And that's where I would go first to answer your question. You feel numb because it's like there's so many different directions I can go emotionally. So what I would do is ask you, where do you need to go? What is the first or worst time you felt a certain level of trauma? Whatever that weight is you're feeling, when did you first feel that? Or when was the worst time you felt that? Because now we got to go rework that memory. Rework how you're responding to that flashback. Talk about post-traumatic stress symptoms. That's what I would do, right? What part of me thinks that I need to worry about growing past people? Because a part of me would feel guilty that I grew emotionally past my dad or my mom, right? And they can't go with me where I'm going. But then the other part of me is like, I got to protect my peace. So how can we get those parts to talk to each other? And that's a lot of what attachment is, right?
Which we're going to tell you about in a
We're
minute.
going to get into these different parts of ourselves because they need to talk to each other and get on a similar page. And it sounds like a lot and it could be overwhelming, but guaranteed there is a theme through what every one of our parts need, and we just need to find that theme. And then it's like a domino effect. So that's how I use EMDR, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But figuring out what the parts need, right? You are made up of a lot of different people that like have stopped growing at a certain point emotionally, and then you just had to keep moving because you grow, you're alive. But we just leave and we're stuck at certain points and they don't get resolved.
And I just kind of, it reminded me of something I experienced when I first started working with NAMI. We had someone come in and talk about stress management. And what she told us was that everyone should take 10 minutes out of every day to do what they love. That is what, that is how you measure, that is how you manage your stress and everything. And I listened to that, and I will tell you, it took me 2 years to figure out what that was for me.
Yeah.
Like, I've been a mom, I'm a wife, used to be a wife. I worked, I took care of my household, I did everything for everyone else. And I never took the time to figure out, and so it's about that self-awareness, that self-analysis. Sitting down and listening to myself, listening to my thoughts and figuring out what brings me joy. What is it that I want to do? And that should not be a hard question. But for a lot of us it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And because again, we're on autopilot.
Yep. And the interesting thing is that, and I'm glad you brought that up because I'll be 40 next week and I'm just now figuring out something. 40. So yeah, I will be 40 next week. And I'm just realizing, certain things like my likes, my dislikes, my boundaries, my strengths, my weaknesses. It's a continuous kind of like evolution process. And, that was a great question that you asked. The important thing to understand is that all of this takes time. Growth and healing takes time. It is a process.
Yeah.
And so, there is no timetable on it. Some people might heal much faster than others. That's because we're all different. And for me, with some of the most recent life experiences that I've gone through, when I was talking to a friend of mine who's a counselor and also behaviorist as well, he introduced me, and this is not even a source that he gave me. As I was just having a friend-to-friend conversation with him, he literally was like, it sounds like you have this type of attachment style. Like, the hell? What is an attachment style? I don't know what that means. But literally, when I looked it up, a light bulb just went off. And everything in my life flashed before my eyes, all the way from that rearview mirror from childhood, all the way up until this point now, being 40 years old. And to add a little bit of spice to this, what this information that we're about to tell you about now, this even goes deep into the relationships, not only that you have with yourself, but your family members and your significant others.
I gotta throw this before we dip into this. It's the domino that you just talked about and
Words.
relationship.
Yes.
Like, I gotta go
There you go with your words.
Exactly. And I'm actually gonna stack them like a Jenga tower, you know, when they're all stacked up.
Yep.
We first have to be honest.
I was gonna ask you about that. How do you have it in the middle area, the mental area? Do you even incorporate vulnerability?
Right.
Yes.
Open with your
It's the bravest thing you can do.
It is.
Yes.
Vulnerable is
And-
something that you.
And that's a cuss word for a lot of people, Chad. They don't like it.
So
I don't like it.
because of that, right, when we stack this tower, I'm gonna show you, I have to be honest, but I'm gonna tell you who I'm starting the honesty with. Me.
Mhm.
When I look in that mirror, I gotta be like me, you, whatever.
Right.
So I'm honest with myself. The next thing that happens is I establish trust, because you know what? I'm gonna be truthful and honest with myself. The next thing is that connection, because if I'm honest with a person and they trust me, they're gonna be connected. That's the same thing that's happening to me. When I'm honest with myself, I trust myself, there's a connection. Remember I was just talking about my head, my heart, and my mind, right?
Mhm.
That now I have a connection. But what happens then is I can establish a relationship, right? Again, a relationship with myself where I know where I'm at.
And that sets a standard.
Mhm.
So then the fools don't come in.
Right,
And
right.
you're like, well, I treat myself way better than you can.
Right, so the boundaries is easy to maintain. When I ask you why this relationship.
I'm real
is
animated.
important, like all of that is happening.
Easier to let go.
Right, exactly.
Sometimes.
Situations
So
even,
this
yep.
tower pretty strong right now, ain't it?
Mm-hmm.
And then after I got this relationship with myself or with others, if I'm doing this with other people, the very last thing that I have is opportunities. Endless.
Yeah.
Because those things are existing. That's the strength of who I am, my character, if you would, right?
Yep.
But if I pull any one of those things out, just pull one out,
Mm-hmm.
I ain't gonna have an opportunity to do nothing. Pull the trust out,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's no connection. Pull being honest out. I ain't gonna trust you.
Yeah.
Pull the relationship out. Ain't no opportunity. You pull any one of them things out, I'm not gonna be at that point where I can have the opportunity to go back and get that friend, to prune the people that I get, to continue to grow. Because it's a process
Mhm.
with an outcome. And if we move at different rates of speed, it's a journey with a destination. But again, it's a process that we're constantly going through. Yes,
When you say trust yourself, you mean like trusting your judgment on like what type of people?
all of that.
Yep, all that.
That you don't second guess yourself, where you realize the value in who you are and what you, and, you know, the corner cliche, bring to the table, right? But don't bring that to the table, be the table. Right?
Ooh, that's my phone screensaver. Let me show you. It says, "Dear Black girl, you are the table." Period.
Yep. Yep.
Walk in that strength,
Period.
knowing that everybody coming to you
Okay.
to be where they need to be.
That's right.
He's describing secure attachment.
Yes. Okay, yes, so we got to definitely get into this because we got like 10 minutes left. Yeah.
Okay.
No, you did the homework already. So the whole panel, we've done the homework, but we're about to reveal some things as far as what attachment theory is. And so this is what psychologists have coined as attachment theory. And so basically with attachment theory, it relates to how we attach to our parents when we grow up. How our parents, because everyone has their own attachment style. And so as I was talking about with my friend, you know, he told me that based on some of the things that I was describing that I had recently endured, or just patterns that I had throughout my entire life in terms of my relationships, in terms of how I dealt with things with my parents, and even how I even formed my friendships. He told me that I had an anxious attachment style. And so I was like, what does that mean? So I literally went online and looked it up. I was like, attachment theory. Okay, I came across the Attachment Project. So I took this online assessment or whatever, and sure enough, it said I have an anxious attachment style. And I was like, okay. So there's actually 4 attachments, and it actually falls on a spectrum. And we're talking about an attachment spectrum. So there's 4: secure attachment, anxious, dismissive avoidant, disorganized. So with secure attachment, Lamont, that's you. You have that card. Read what secure attachment
He
is.
literally just described it.
Yep, he described it. Yeah.
Having a secure attachment style means being comfortable with both proximity and autonomy. These individuals are self-content, but they are also comfortable in relationships. Dating is also not an issue for the securely attached, as they tend to be open and straightforward. These people are warm and easy to connect to, and thus fancied by others. They feel comfortable approaching and bonding with potential partners.
Does that sound like anyone?
Okay, then. We're going to challenge that.
Oh, I've already challenged this. That's my mother. I've already challenged this. That's not even her. That's not even her. Once I learned about these attachment styles, I went through everybody in my family. That's you, that's you, that's you, that's you. All right, so then the second one is anxious preoccupied. So that's my attachment style, and also Christians. So anxious attachment styles are also known as preoccupied individuals, and these attachment styles, they crave relationships, intimacy, and love. And for this reason, they may have a hard time being single. Sound like anybody yet? People with this attachment style might enjoy dating, as it often involves flirting, being seduced, and receiving attention. And this type of reassurance is a confidence boost, and it's tempting to people with an anxious attachment style. But once dating turns into a relationship, however, such individuals start experiencing fear, rejection, jealousy, and even distress. And it manifests in different ways. And since that is my attachment style, I can say for me, over time, my fears were, okay, I had to always be on guard in terms of, like, I was waiting for a shoe to drop. Like, what's going to happen if, I do something that this person doesn't like, or if this person doesn't say good morning to me, or something like that, in a text message. Just basic things. You're always anxious. You're always thinking, or you can misinterpret something that someone says. Oh, what do they mean by that? Are they mad at me? Did I say something that upset you? That's what anxious is, and ultimately it can turn into a form of anxiety.
Yeah, it's awful here.
Yes. Yeah.
Listen, I'm late to take my nerve pills. Please note, normalize meds for Black women, okay, because I'm in therapy and I pop my Lexapro 10 milligrams, period, okay? But I do want to say that in addition to what you're saying, it's not just intimate relationships like dating and stuff. So even my kids, I'd be like, oh my God, am I being a good mommy? Am I giving you everything you need? So, do you like me? It's kind of that whole thing. Okay, you want me to read this?
Yes.
Okay,
Dismissive, avoidant.
Avoidant dismissive is characterized by independence, assertiveness, and self-sufficiency. People with this attachment style have no problem being single. On the other hand, they may be very sociable, popular, and friendly, such as individuals usually date many people. Such individuals usually date many people, but lose interest as soon as sexual partner tries to connect with them on a deeper emotional level. They pursue what they want in a relationship regardless of others' needs. So there's a major fear of intimacy here, likely because intimacy is like equated with like pain. So I know that I'm supposed to be in a relationship and I kind of want you there, but then also I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. So I'm just going to keep you this far. And that's with friendships. And I used to treat teenage girls. And now that I'm on a college campus, I'm hearing the same thing of these young women. I don't trust for females. I'm like, girl, who hurt you? And that's the whole thing. But that's the dismissive, and it shows up in all the relationships, and it's because of an unresolved intimacy issue for a dismissive person.
Right. And also something important with that too, with dismissive type of individuals, that's more so they don't like to feel emotions, or they're fearful of emotions. So like, for instance, if you're in a relationship with someone, if you're in a relationship with someone who is dismissive, avoidant, and you're an anxious, preoccupied person, so that need to be clingy and attached, that ain't gonna work.
That's not a
They're gonna be like, hold on, wait a minute, you can't get too close to me like that. What's wrong with you? Why you being weak? Why are you showing these emotions? That scares those individuals, and so they will ultimately push away. So
that is me and my husband.
It's so funny because
it's interesting.
In reality, these two actually pair up a lot, and it ends up being a toxic kind of situation. But the best if you have an anxious attachment style, the best person to be with is someone who is secure.
Yep. So
now the worst, and it's a combination of anxious and dismissive avoidant, is disorganized.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Disorganized
not the worst.
/ fearful avoidant. The disorganized attachment style, also referred to as fearful avoidant, is a contradictory attachment style that alternates between the preoccupied and dismissive styles. People with this attachment style want to be loved and connect with others. Initially, they present themselves as confident, attractive, and exciting, as if they have life all figured out. Yet their fear of being hurt by someone they trust makes it difficult to bond and open up. Such individuals might have a hard time dating, since the process of getting to know and trust every potential partner might be painful, confusing, and distressing. So they just want to be alone.
On one hand, they want to be, right, so on one hand, they want, and this is just a small snippet of it. If you go to the attachment project, which I encourage everyone, take the test. It only takes like maybe 10, 15 minutes, if that. It's going to ask you questions about your personality. It's going to ask you questions about your mother. It's going to ask you questions about your father. It's going to ask you questions about your romantic life. And then it's going to give you your result based on that, because it goes deeper back into your childhood to figure out how, you attach to your parents, and how your parents, either gave you love or emotional affection, what was encouraged in your household or what wasn't, potentially. It will ask those deep questions that way. And so ultimately, with someone who has a disorganized attachment, from what I've learned and read deeper into that, that person wants to be loved, but at the same time, they're also fearful of it. And 9 times out of 10, someone who grew up who has a disorganized attachment may have grown up in a home that was potentially abusive or violent, and so they didn't really know how to cope with that. And so on one hand, they wanted love, but they couldn't seek it because obviously, they were fearful that their parent, whether it be mom or dad, was going to react in a chaotic way. And so ultimately that creates that type of attachment potentially.
That's usually associated to, like, as far as mental health diagnoses, are going to be like borderline personality disorder.
Right. Yep. Spot on.
Yeah, bipolar,
Yes.
maybe too.
Yes. Yes.
Because
Those are related to that.
you literally have to live with one foot up and one foot out to kind of manage being around certain personalities, and it's just a way to protect yourself.
Right.
For me to be bipolar or have that disorganized attachment where you're just like, I don't know how to show up because I don't know what's going to happen. And that's all a trauma response. But and also, let me just say this, okay? We out here with the nice, pretty printouts, but please don't put yourself in a box. Okay?
Right. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah.
That goes for the DSM-5. You can overlap.
Yep. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So I just want to say, that even if you decide to go purchase my books, even though it's amazing, don't let me label you.
Right.
Right.
And when you take that test also, it depends on how you answer the questions.
Exactly. Because if you don't answer it accurately,
Are you answering like little
oh,
Ray?
I'm secure. How are you?
As your teenage self, as your little Ray self?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So as you grow into that, after you do the growth part, you can make a decision.
Well, here's the important thing to know.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it is.
I like
Here's
it.
the important thing to know about this too. I mean, this falls on the spectrum. Just because when you answer the questions, you may get that particular one, but as we go through life and we grow,
It changes.
then it changes. Yeah,
And you
can
should
become
change.
securely
If you're not
attached.
changing, you're
exactly.
dying.
Right.
You're dead.
Is it something that you care, that you like heal from? Or
What's the question? I'm sorry.
the attachment?
Oh,
I think
It's not a diagnosis.
no, this
Right.
is not,
It's
this
not
is
a
not a
diagnosis.
diagnosis. This is just a way to conceptualize how you show up in relationships and why. It's related to probably like a PTSD, like because trauma would inform if you have whatever level, and that can be, let me talk about cured, okay? Because even coping, right? Like if somebody's coming into my office and they're like, I don't know if it's anxiety, and I say, yeah, this is like a little unspecified anxiety or a little generalized anxiety disorder. You check the boxes. I'm not here to get rid of your anxiety. There is such thing as a healthy level of anxiety. Otherwise, you wouldn't got up and get to work, brush your teeth, right? You need a little bit of get up and go, like the old people say, right? So you have to be on a certain, I believe in spectrums. So there is such thing as a healthy level of anxiety. You should not want to get rid of your anxiety because it can save your life from running from a freaking bear, right? So you need it. What we're doing, at least the way I practice, is I want you to live in harmony with the symptoms. I want you to know how to be resilient, know what to do when they come. Like you plan ahead. Like I'm in traffic. I know that I'm going to go down 26. It might be an accident. So let me take my deep breath before I leave. That's coping. That is living in harmony with the things you know is going to come. So it's just really about making sure that you're not coming to therapy to be cured from anxiety or depression. It's just a thing. Because you're going to get sad.
Right.
So
So,
generational thing with anxiety. But then, 'cause I can see it with all my family,
Mhm.
like you said, but then how they handle it. attached.
That makes a difference.
Okay.
Mhm.
And what I would tell you is, you know, what Brandon said is, and definitely what Christian has said, is not to put yourself in this box.
Mhm.
When we look back, we're looking back to learn, not to pass judgment or blame,
You're collecting data. You're
right?
just using the information.
Right? Because the value in knowing what your past is and understanding it, like I was saying earlier, it gives us the ability to plan for our future,
Mhm.
right? And that's not worrying about it, it's planning for it. And so there's value in looking back and then saying, you know, I understand where this comes from now. And then what am I going to filter out to prevent from going forward? Like, I'm not gonna pass this on to my niece or my nephew or my own child, but I am gonna pass on these gifts and stuff that, you know, we talk about, the value in what I bring. So, yeah.
Yeah, all this information is just a part of your toolkit.
Yep.
You know, it's a part of how, you know, everything you've dealt with now, this, like I said, this is our moment, but we're gonna deal with other things. And this is all part, like I said, when I was diagnosed with anxiety, it was that word, that diagnosis became a tool for me. It became something that helped me, you know, avoid, scary situations. I was able to cope better. I was able to, if I needed to take medication, I knew to do that, and I was okay with that. So these are just kind of tools in our toolbox. But I will say, I guess, I don't want to sound a little upset about this, but you know,
I'm giving, go ahead.
you know, sometimes, you know, you hear people when you're dating, they're like, well, don't bring your past relationships, or don't bring your past.
Right.
That's all I got.
Right, exactly. Some of us worse than others. Some of us worse than others.
Can't bring somebody else's past.
And you know what? That's a whole other conversation right there, because in reality, there's this whole movement that's surfaced in terms of, okay, well, you know, if it doesn't fit me or if it's negative, I don't want that in my life. What happened to the days of when, you know, you actually work through something?
Yeah.
Because actually in relationships, being able to stand the test of time and being able to go through something together, to grow from it and then prosper from it, is actually shows that you are much more in harmony with each other versus being in a relationship or a friendship where, oh, it's all roses and clouds and everything else all the time or whatever. And then as soon as something happens, now we don't know what to do.
I appreciate that comment, because people are always like, oh, but you know, negative. That you can't always live in peace and harmony. Like, you have to have,
That's not fair.
Yeah.
You have to exercise the muscle.
Correct.
Right.
Right. Like, a lot of people, because I talk about this training and I'm dropping all of this stuff, it's like, man, you sound like your life is all put together. Let me tell you, my positivity meter will still peg out. I get upset about things, but I know where it's coming from now. Where before I didn't know, and I just continue to lash out even more. But now that I know when it's pegging out and why, I'm able to move in that space. And what I'll tell you is words again mean something to me, right? So when do I pull out a tool?
Mhm.
When something's broke.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only time I go find a screwdriver. That's the
Well,
only
my
time I'm
daddy
gonna go
used to
find
show
a
me.
hammer, because I need it, because something is broke, what needs to be fixed.
Right.
Our lives are not broken.
Right.
We don't really need to be fixed. We just need to be put back on
You little
track.
tune-up, you little tune-up, a little tightening of the brakes in there, right?
So in order to do that, I gotta practice. I gotta practice this thing called life. So these are practices, and when you do them on a regular basis, you get pretty good. So practice don't make perfect, but it makes progress. And so that's what I'm about, right? Is finding a way to create more moments of joy than moments of sadness and anger.
Yep.
That's what you want to be able to, that's the balance. When I got the right people around me, I done pruned them, right? I'm no longer numb, I feel, and I'm gonna tell you what I'm feeling. If I'm feeling this, like that wheel of feelings, I got one of them on there. I got a couple of them. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. But most importantly, right, I'm able to understand my feelings and what somebody else does to me. That's the value of loving on yourself first.
Right. Yep.
Because I ain't gonna be able to love nobody else until I can love me.
That's right.
That's the domino effect. That's the ripple effect.
Yep.
You begin to feel better because the people around you will feel better. When we as a people are better, we be better around the people that we want to be with. I would say this, man. I'll get it from this perspective. I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna y'all respond, right? Call and response. Hurt people what?
Hurt people.
So I'm gonna tell you this. Why not help people help people?
But
Right.
some people can't be helped.
Right. But here's the deal. We're not saying that we're gonna fix and save everybody, but helped people will help others. That want to be helped, right?
Mhm.
You're right.
I will share.
Mhm.
Speak from a place of healing.
Whatever information I have, You know, and like you said, you know, you have some people that they come into a relationship and you disclose, yes, I live with anxiety, they want to take off. You know?
Mhm.
What? You know, I don't want to deal with that. But you know what, if that's the case, then you want to meet.
Yep. Yep, that's right.
I
Well,
say bye real fast.
Yep. We got one more question?
I was actually getting ready to ask about that. So how do you handle a situation where someone has triggered you and you want to let them know, but at the same time, you don't want to scare them off?
Yeah, you don't want to scare them off, and you may not necessarily be ready to disclose, you know, but at some point is this a romantic somebody or just a friend? Anybody?
Anyone.
You know what, you have to be able to just say, listen, I've been thinking about it, it's been going through my head, and I can't let it go. And I just want to let you know that what happened the other day, that really kind of hit me a little hard. No big deal, but just let you know that, you know, in the future, this is what, and I don't know if you want to use the word trigger, you know, but this is what, you know, upset me. And we got to stop tiptoeing around people, you know, because the thing is, if you can't express yourself and
Have a
tell them what makes you
conversation.
happy and what makes you unhappy, then that's not a relationship for you.
Right.
You're gonna be 6 months in, holding your tongue, and then all of a sudden, you're gonna be driving along talking about, and furthermore, you know. In your car.
Let me tell you what you do.
I just want to add to that, obviously being straightforward, but I think having informed conversations. So I would recommend that you figure out why you're triggered. So like, what part of me was triggered? Because I'm about to start a whole mug line, and I want y'all to buy my mugs. It's going to say, your daddy issues are showing. So I had some people on the gram, like, a lot of people loved it, right? And then like two people were like, this is not as empowering. And what do you mean about your daddy issues? Because they don't follow me, they don't know the movement. And I would never want to offend anyone. My point is, I'm holding them up because Christian, I got this new job last week, never had this big of an important role ever. And my daddy issues were showing. I talked to my therapist about like, oh my God, like all these things. And she said, Christian, who is you trying to prove yourself to? I said, oh my God, it's my dad, right? Because it's me, right? If I'm triggered by someone, I know that it's me. And so I have a course that I wrote, Is It Me? How My Daddy Issues Are Showing in My Relationships. Because I have to make sense of why I'm triggered first. Because if you're going to have the straightforward conversation, then I can speak educated about, okay, so I sat with this for a minute, and I had to talk to self. I had to say self, and self said, huh? Right? And I can make sense of it, because I don't think it's fair for us to go and say, you triggered me, and then put all the response, because what they're going to hear, because they're not growing, because they haven't grown, they're most likely not in a space to hear what you're trying to say.
Right.
And so if you speak from an informed space, you can say, well, okay, you know, you have a better chance, I think, of being received if they understand that you're not saying it's me, because then they're going to put the wall up.
Because what do most people do? They listen to respond, not listen to understand, which is a huge component.
So I think starting with I sat with this for a minute, and it's not you, I'm serious, like this is no little script thing, like this is how I made sense of it, and asking, what do you think? Like, how did you experience that conversation? Because then you're opening up that, that line of communication.
Yeah.
One thing that I would say too is, a lot of times we don't necessarily have somebody that we have a relationship with that I call it mentorship, right? Because a mentor doesn't give me the answers to the test. They ask me the tough questions that I have to say to answer out loud. So if you have somebody that you trust that you can go to, and they're not going to judge you when you say, hey, I'm challenged with this relationship. My man or my girl, whatever, did this, and now we're in this spot. And then they're going to ask me the tough question. Well, why is that bothering you? What are you afraid of? What are you dealing with, right? And these type of questions come in, and you answer, it's like, you know what? Yeah. And that opens that door for you to go back with that informed conversation. So I'm asking this of you all, is to find that confidant that you can talk to and say, I don't want you to solve my problem. I just want you to listen, right? Because I had to go through this, right? I was a problem solver, fix it for years. So I had to learn to listen, right? So that I could listen to learn. And the value in that comes now when somebody comes to me and they say, I just want you to hear what I got to say. I'm not going to say anything until they're done. And then they say to me, so what do you think? So, well, it's a good question. My question to you is, are you prepared for them to tell you blah, blah, blah? It's like, ooh, yeah, I ain't think of that.
That's what a therapist
Yep.
would do. That's what I do.
Yep.
Right?
I ain't gonna tell you what to do. I'm just gonna say, okay, sis, well, what you think?
Mhm.
What you think? They hate that.
Yep.
But then it gets
Well-
you thinking, and then you get better.
Well, we can say the clock now, so as you can see, we can talk all night about this, and so again, this is why we have a continuation of these discussions, because obviously we are, making some headway and giving people tools that they need to be able to make informed decisions about their own lives and be able to heal some of those issues that they have, on their own. Because for me, I felt like for a long time I didn't have, certain resources, and I think a lot of folks in our community, especially, don't necessarily have those tools and resources. So let's create a space where we can talk about it and, put it out there. So, see, I've been getting a lot of comments from folks who've been watching online as well, too. Some text messages from folks. So thank you guys for joining us online. So we will actually do this again. And of course, I always invite my panelists to come back if they want. I mean, again, we can always have this discussion at any time.
Yeah.
And so we'll look to do this again in June. So stay tuned for more information on that. And I appreciate everybody for joining online. And thank y'all for being here tonight.
Yay.
Appreciate y'all. Yes.
Can I check on my website?
Yes.
How to find you?
Yes.
Hey, you may find me at couchwithchristian.com, or you can follow me at couchwithchristian on the gram, the Daddy Issues Therapist. What's up? I'm scared. It's Couch, COUCH, with WITH, Christian. Couch with Christian. So, spread the word about the Daddy Issues movement, because we finna have this conversation, y'all. We finna change the world. It's gonna be great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm a veteran. I'm familiar with the Big Barn Retreat, but just kind of like how it was explained to me with like a whole bunch of horses and
Mhm.
stuff, and I just kind of downplayed it.
Exactly.
But
Oh,
you
you
said
gotta
like
tell 'em what it's
holistic
about.
healing and things like that.
Yeah.
How could I get more information? Because I already have referral.
Right.
stuff.
Well, first of all, thank you, right, for not only your service, right, but continuing to be in a better place. It's the BigRedBarnRetreat.org. You can go to the website, Facebook page. But it is exactly what you just said is why I'm on a campaign to change the narrative, right?
Okay.
Too often, when we look at the combat veteran, when we hear that, the image that is conjured up, and I'm just gonna call it what it is the square-jawed, blonde-haired, blue-eyed white man. Right?
Mhm.
That's the image that Hollywood has displayed as our veteran, or the opposite, which is the homeless veteran with a sign on the side of the road in combat fatigue saying,
Mhm.
feed me, I'm a homeless vet. Those are the two images. We forget about you, right? And so it's unfortunate, and I recognize that. So at the Big Red Barn Retreat, it's not just horses. That's one of the elements. We do psychotherapy, which is the equine psychotherapy. That's one of the services that's offered. There's music therapy, there's art therapy, and the programs that I run, post-traumatic growth, are therapeutic. No one on my team is a therapist, and I don't discount therapy, right? Because therapy is helpful. But there's
But
been
that's not it.
right.
Mhm.
So Vikram Patel was a psychologist in India. We know what that population's like, right? And so we cannot leave mental health to mental health professionals alone,
Right.
right?
Right.
Our communities have to help us, and so that's
And that
what we-
is a therapeutic space.
right. And so that therapeutic space that's there exists at the Big Red Barn Retreat, while female veterans and first responders, and what I like to call you is a defender. Right? You defend here at home, you defend abroad in other countries and places, and so we have not forgotten you. At our location, we're the only one that has an equal number of programs set aside for our female veterans that we have for our male. So people look at me crazy when I say I'm doing 6 programs for females and 6 for males. Here's the beauty in this, what you just said, this wave, this is a movement, right? Not a moment, but a movement. The tidal wave of change is cresting back towards the shoreline with post-traumatic growth and the awareness. We did 12 classes last year, basically one a month. This year, I was asked to do 6 more before the end of the year, to do 18. Next year, I've already planned for 24 classes,
Nice.
right? There's a need for this conversation. There's a need for this way, this holistic approach to living a better life. So come, right? And you will experience the very thing that you need to be able to take care of yourself first so that you can be there for others.
Yes.
Thank you.
Go get
Yes.
that, girl. Is it the website? The Big Red Barn Retreat.org?
That's it. That's it.
Yes.
you.